Good afternoon. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive, and this is our weekly Westchester Update, Monday, October 2nd, 2023. We're happy that you've tuned in. We have a lot to cover today. We're certainly going to put priority on the recent flood incident that we had this past Friday, and then also talk about a number of other different issues and policies that we have. We'll be joined in a few minutes by our Deputy County Executive, Ken Jenkins, and he will tell you about this week's hero that we have within Westchester County. We're trying to spotlight the employees of our county government that do exceptional work, make sure you get to know who they are and see the kind of work that they've done across their department responsibilities. And then over the course of a number of weeks, you'll see the totality of what Westchester's workforce has been accomplishing for us as residents and citizens. And then in a second or two, I'm going to bring up the town supervisor for the town of Mamaroneck, Jane Elkind-Eny. It's been a very busy week for Jane. Mamaroneck was one of the areas that was hit very hard by the flooding most recently. I'll be talking a little bit later about an issue that involves a water filtration plant, Westchester Joint Water Works, that affects the town of Mamaroneck. And Jane will also take proper pride in the town of Mamaroneck being named a climate-smart community in New York State at the bronze level of accomplishments. There's a lot of good things to talk about in Mamaroneck. I've had the good fortune of representing the town of Mamaroneck for over 30 years in one capacity or another, got to know all the streets and the side streets and certainly the people of Mamaroneck. So we're very happy that Jane is here, as she has been here before, to talk a little bit about the town of Mamaroneck. But first, let me touch on the major issue of the moment, and that is flooding. We saw that on Thursday into Friday, and then part of Saturday morning of this week just passed, that we received an intense amount of rain within a very short period of time, which caused massive flooding in wide swaths of the county. This is comparable, if not quite equal, to the Hurricane Ida impact, which happened in the early part of September of 2021. And we've had a series of rain incidents like this spread out over the last number of years. Some of them have been triggered by named storms, like Superstorm Sandy and Hurricane Irene. We've had unnamed storms, like the one in 2007, that made tremendous impact and flooding in our various different communities. And we begin by understanding that there's an issue of topography at hand. We are in Westchester County blessed by being immediately accessible to the Hudson River on our west and the Long Island Sound in our east. And that makes us downstream of many different creeks and streams, as well as smaller rivers that course through Westchester County. It gives us a beautiful setting, and people live, work, and play by these bodies of water. But in moments like this, and we're seeing more of them more frequently, and certainly you can look at climate change as being a reason for this, we're having more and more incidents of flooding that reaches a level that causes pain and suffering for individuals in their homes, in their businesses, which many of them are damaged because of the flooding. Some of our public facilities and public institutions are impacted by this, and rightfully so. People want to know, what are we doing about this, and how are we working together in a cooperative fashion? Let me say, first off, that the damage that occurred on Friday is in the process of being assessed. We've reached out to all of the different local governments, the towns, the villages, and the cities, for them to make an assessment of the damage. And FEMA establishes for Westchester County a threshold of $4.4+ million of damage impact in order to open the door for FEMA assistance. We had FEMA assistance in Hurricane Ida and in some of the past storms. We'll have to see what that assessment comes back with. But the assessment is on another level as well, and that is an assessment of what are the areas that are flood prone and what do we have to do to improve and to fix these things to reduce the amount of flooding. I have to say at the outset, though, and this is the unfortunate reality, Mother Nature decides when and where to dump how much rain on this county and other places as well. If you saw the impact on Friday, it was not a Westchester-specific impact. Brooklyn took the brunt of the storm and had urban streets that were overrun with water, rivers in urban settings that haven't seen that before. It shut down subway lines in New York City, and it shut off our 3 commuter rail lines here that reach Westchester County and the suburbs north of us in Putnam and in Dutchess counties. We saw the flooding in northern New Jersey and in southwestern Connecticut. So this is a regional impact, and it's not the first time that we've seen this kind of intense rain in a very short period of time. We all understand that when you have high tide, certainly on the Sound Shore side of the county where the tidal influences are there, although there are tidal influences in the Hudson River as well. When you have tide coming in on the Long Island Sound, and the Long Island Sound is the place where the Byram River, the Blind Brook, the Sheldrake and the Mamaroneck River, Stevenson Creek, where the Bronx River all dump their water. When there's high tide and the tide is coming in, there is no place for that water to go. And that is a reality of Mother Nature and the realities of our topography that make it very difficult for us to try to secure ourselves completely from any impacts of flooding. That it can get better is essential. That it could be completely protected is hard to imagine with the kind of reality that we face. But that doesn't mean that we aren't working in a host of different areas. In the time frame before the flooding happened, all of our local governments and the county government, along with the state government, are designed to try to keep people safe and protected at the front end of this. So we looked at our various roadways, and immediately when we saw that those roadways were starting to be impacted by the rain, those roadways were shut off. We know that the Bronx River Parkway floods very easily from Yonkers to White Plains at the county center. That road was shut down right off, and the Bronx River and the Bronx River Parkway became as one, as it often does during these situations. We have direct responsibility for the Bronx River as a county government, Bronx River Parkway, I should say, and the other parkways are under the direct influence of the state government, and they at various times shut down portions of the Cross County Parkway, the Hutchinson River Parkway, and the Sawmill River Parkway. And they also had impacts on I-95, the New England Thruway, and some of the entrance and exit ramps in Mamaroneck and Rye, which shut that down during the context of the rain that were coming down. I drove around on Friday, perhaps a bit recklessly, to see some of the water systems myself, and I've traveled through the Sound Shore, down to Mount Vernon, up through Greenburgh, Yonkers, and Greenburgh, and I saw Central Avenue shut down because of rain, major deposit of rain that stalled out cars just south of Four Corners in Hartsdale. I saw any number of streets in New Rochelle that were affected by it, and it made a maze to try to get around them and to maneuver from point A to point B. The good news that revolves around that is there were no serious injuries tracked to this water incident, and there were no fatalities. We were not so lucky back in September of 2020 when we had 5 fatalities from urban flooding situations where motorists got out of their cars or in whatever way were out individually and faced rushing water and lost their lives. So this time we're appreciative of the fact that there were no fatalities. Our Westchester County 60 Control Emergency Center answered 820 incident calls on Friday, and that included water rescues, flooded basement properties, wires and trees that were down, gas emergencies, and across the board. There were 52 searches of structures by our Department of Emergency Services. We evacuated 13 people. We evacuated an EMS patient during this period of time. And we had at least 132 people who chose to shelter in place, and we wanted to check up to make sure that they too were okay. This involved a number of our different county resources. We were available to work with the state and the MTA. We provided Westchester B-Line buses to help stranded Metro North passengers when they got as far as White Plains, to help get them to further north in the county up to Mount Kisco. We want to publicly thank our partners, Liberty Lines, the leadership and the drivers, TWU, Local 100, those are the bus drivers themselves, and we had great support from our Department of Public Works and Transportation. Michael Swee specifically helped us accommodate that particular situation, which started in both directions from the Mount Kisco train station to the White Plains Transit Center from 6:30 in the evening on Friday night until 12:30 on Saturday morning. The tracks between White Plains and Mount Kisco were washed out. We stepped in the breach to help do that. 5 of our local fire departments assisted with residential pump outs on Saturday. 45 homes in Mamaroneck were affected by that. This was for Jane and for Mayor Tom Murphy, a source of great irritation over the weekend. New York State helped us by sending 3 flood incident strike teams into Westchester County, and our County Police Emergency Service Unit rescued 73 people from vehicles that were stuck on flooded parkways. Most of these individuals were stuck inadvertently. The circumstances around them overtook them. There were some cases where people did not, these are the minority of cases, but they would not observe the restrictions of access to roads, thought they could get through standing water, could not. Cars became disabled, had to be towed out of there, and they themselves had to be rescued. The water got high enough, got high enough for people to drown in those situations. And we have had in years past circumstances where people would drown on highways that were caught in very high water. We had none of those things that happened this time, so we're very grateful about that. We have to look realistically, once we get through the crisis itself, if we can make sure that there are no lives lost and our road systems do dry out and we can start to use all of these roads have been made passable by the better weather that we had on late Saturday, all day Sunday, and now today on Monday, what do we do about the damages that have happened. I mentioned before the assessment for the purposes of FEMA assistance will require us to reach a certain threshold. We don't know if we'll reach that threshold or not. We'll find out, and when we do, we'll certainly report that to everybody. If it does open the door, then FEMA gets involved and individuals can issue claims. But either way, we have been looking at it as a county government and as municipal governments of those things that we can do. And we've been underway to doing these things. Someone who may be flooded says, haven't you done anything? Why haven't you done anything? We've done plenty of things. We've focused at the county level on county-owned facilities and assets, and that's very important to understand. We have the responsibility for the sewer treatment function of Westchester County. 7 wastewater treatment plants. And I might add, if those plants cease to function properly, one of 2 very bad things happen. Either there's a release of raw sewage into the Hudson River or into the Long Island Sound, or there's a shutdown of the system which backs up sewerage and many times backs it up into the bathrooms that individuals occupy. So it is within our common interest to take a bad situation from becoming much worse by putting capital money into the upgrade of our various wastewater treatment plants. We have a project for flood mitigation at the Yonkers wastewater treatment plant, far and away our largest plant, in many ways our most problematic plant. We have odor issues with that plant that are a continuing source of frustration to the neighborhood, but the functioning of that plant requires a major project. 30% of that project has completed its design, and we have to complete that design. These are complicated things, well beyond simple, go in, make a couple of fixes, and it's all better. At our Ossining plant, we have an electrical feeder upgrade project that makes sure that all electrical components function. If the electricity to a sewer treatment plant does not function properly, then the plant cannot function properly, and by not performing its responsibilities, sewage gets backed up or sewage gets releases. We have bids going out this year for pump stations. Weaver Street in Mamaroneck, Jackson Avenue, Water Street, each have pump stations which pump sewage, because it is a gravity-driven system, has to pump sewage from a lower level up to a higher level where it can reach into trunk lines that then reach into the sewer treatment plant so that these can be properly treated. Failure to have upgraded pump stations means that sewage once again backs up into homes. We have our Yonkers transfer station, our material recovery facility, with additional flood mitigation measures, which are slated to begin very shortly and be completed by the end of October of this year, which is a very important step. And then also the transfer station for the northern tier, we're replacing scale at that facility. It's being raised to help relieve water infiltration and flooding that causes malfunction. All of these projects that the county is responsible for represents a part of a resiliency evaluation for potential infrastructure improvements, hardening our infrastructure, to use that phrase. It's based on new FEMA activities and so forth. We have already completed a number of different projects. As Supervisor Eny is going to talk about, we've made a commitment to the town of Mamaroneck on a very essential flood study that they're in the process of doing. We've made a major commitment, a $17 million commitment to a Village of Mamaroneck project that's been out there for quite a while, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineer projects that will total about $100 million in total cost. The county has committed to a $17 million contribution to that project. There are 4 projects. There's the Bowman Avenue Dam in Rye and Rye Brook. There is a Garden Lake project in the town of Mamaroneck. In the village of Scarsdale, Fox Hollow watershed improvements, all approved. Village of Tarrytown, the Low Park drainage improvement program. All of that totals over $5 million worth of expenditure. Very importantly, in Rye Brook Village, Avon Circle, it's a complex where many senior citizens live. That project of an engineering study was a $100,000 project, and the county funded almost half of that project to make sure that it happens. In all of these things that relate to flooding, the process is simple, but there's a complication involved at each one of these steps. The first process is assessment of flood risk. The studies that are out there are studies in Briarcliff Manor, there's studies in the village of Hastings, all up and down the list. I've got a memo full of them. It doesn't warrant my repeating every single one to you. For those who are interested, we're happy to dialogue with you about how these happen. But there are 45 municipalities in Westchester County, and every one of those communities have some degree of flooding. Making that assessment, understanding, first of all, what are the priorities, and then having a professional review be done on each of these priorities. And that professional review is important because it's not just enough to tell the anecdotal story of what you lost because of a flooding, but we have to understand what causes the flooding and what is the underpinning of what would be needed to fix that flooding, knowing that people have lost personal belongings, things that are important to them, maybe lost the value of their house, is the urgency reason why we do these things. But once we determine through the assessment process, through the study process, what has to be done, we move to the second phase, which is complicated in its own right. And that's the engineering and the design of what will help limit that problem, what will reduce that amount of flooding. There are certain tools that we have available, generically speaking. We can create retention ponds above ground to capture certain amounts of surface water, depending on how it reaches a stream, a creek, or a river. There's the capacity to do underground water retention, underground vaults, where water reaches a certain level and instead of being running off into the storm drain system, it sinks and is retained within the property in the ground. Creating porous pavement situations, which came up in a conversation we had yesterday in Larchmont at a public session, and to have that in a way so that the ground underneath the surface absorbs some of the water rather than it running off. Keep in mind the development that we've had in Westchester County over the last 80 years in the post-war era. That development involves lots and lots of paving, impervious surface, which the water will run off of and going into drains. But at some point in time, when you have the intense amount of water coming down from the sky and the inability to have it drain out, because you may have a high tide situation or a saturated capacity situation, the water can't escape through normal processes. What were once open fields that are now, housing complexes, office developments, we're not absorbing the same amount of water in the natural way that you would have if you had a more rural setting. And that water comes into creeks and streams and corridors for which the existing system can't handle. All of those different issues are important mitigation things, and those are part of the strategies used in each of these different assessments by communities to try to lessen. And there's things that you and I can do. We can take something as simple as a rain barrel and put it at the bottom of our water spout. So the rain that comes off our roof goes through the gutters, comes out. It might go on our backyard grasses or our side yard grasses, and it could run off and go down to the stormwater system. Or with a sufficient size rain barrel, it's stored in the rain barrel. It doesn't add to the stormwater system. And if you have a private home, you can do that, and I can do that at any point in time. And that would help reduce the amount of water that goes into the system. So there are things that we need to do societally and structurally through government. We're in the process of doing as many of those as we can. Let me keep in mind now the third part of this. So we've made assessments. We understand the design of what the projects would be that would resolve it. Now we get to the finance side of it. The cost of mitigation is huge. No town, no village, and no city has the resources necessary to do that remediation on their own in their communities. Let me add that when the county gets involved with superior resources, the county, city, town, and village do not have enough resources to do that. We have to turn to the state and ultimately to the federal government, even the state of New York, because they have problems in Brooklyn, they have problems in Nassau County, they have problems in Rockland County. It's not just Westchester alone. And so the money starts to become much more important at the federal level. Let me tie this into something that's important in matter of public policy. We had federal government pass an infrastructure bill that put money out there for hosts of infrastructure, water projects, only a small part of it, transportation projects, roads, bridges, a host of different things. It passed, and it passed on a bipartisan basis, but there were objections to it, and there were people that opposed spending that kind of money for infrastructure. Where do we think the money comes to help a local community do this flood mitigation if it doesn't come from money that the federal government has set aside for infrastructure? A year ago, New York voters went to the polls and voted for a $4.2 billion bond act for New York environmental projects. And those environmental projects included amongst them things along this lines, things that would help us deal with flooding along with a host of other things. And $4.2 billion is a lot of money. But there were people who opposed that. There were people who said, no, we can't spend that kind of money. Where do you think the money is going to come from for the projects that are needed to mitigate flooding if it doesn't come from a project like that? There is a direct correlation between the things that you support, the funding that you support, and whether that funding is then there to complement what's necessary to solve the flooding problem or to address the flooding problem. So that correlation is oftentimes disconnected. Someone will say, well, we need to do more about flooding. But they didn't support the Bond Act. They didn't support the Infrastructure Act. So where does that money come from? How does that thing come? It's easy to tap into anger. It's easy to channel the frustration that somebody has when they've lost things in their personal setting because of what happens with floods. But it's not so easy to then make the tough decisions that go with that, because we care about taxes. This administration has not raised county taxes in 4 years, yet we've still done capital projects along the lines that I've indicated. That's not easy to do, but we've been able to do it so far. We hope we can continue to do it. But you that's watching, you that cares about these things, have to make the connections between stated positions and public policy and what will actually represent the results that will address this issue. This is an ongoing challenge. It's one of the major challenges for our next guest, but she has plenty of challenges. She's up to the plenty of challenges. She served as a member of the Larchmont Village Board and as a member of the Mamaroneck Town Council before becoming a Mamaroneck Town Supervisor. And she has been preceded by many talented public officials. I've known quite a lot of them: Dolores Battaglia, Caroline Silverstone, Elaine Price, Paul Ryan. We've had the good benefit of the service of Nancy Seligson and Valerie Moore O'Keefe, and now we have the benefit in the town of Mamaroneck, a town of about 30,000 people. It includes all of the village of Larchmont, part of the village, a larger portion of the village of Mamaroneck, and then a significant unincorporated section of Mamaroneck town. The person has all these headaches, all this water right at her front desk. Jane Elkine-Eny. Madam Supervisor, please. Thank you for joining us on such a propitious day.
Thank you, George, for inviting me to talk about my favorite topic. And not only do I have flooding all over town, but in my basement too. So I share in everybody's pain. But fortunately this morning, I had the fortune of having a meeting with the Board of Legislators Budget Committee, and they approved a $300,000 grant for the town of Mamaroneck for a comprehensive study of our stormwater drain system. And this is really a first, because it's the first time that such a study will ever be conducted. Our community was built mainly in the 20s, that's 1920s, so the stormwater system is older than all of us, and we really don't know what's down there, and we'll be able to evaluate it and, find out what's down here. So it's the first time we've done this study, and it's the first time we've gotten a grant to do the study. So the process will be to update and map the whole underwater sewer system and identify actual defects in the system. And once we identify the defects, the next step will be, as the county executive said, to sort of do an implementation plan or a study of how to remedy this situation, and then we'll go through the projects one by one. And there are right now about 15 locations in the town that we feel are critical, and this study is so important because if we just do them as a one-off, we might fix one intersection, like Colonial and Murray is a big one. We might fix Colonial and Murray, and God knows what we're doing downstream to some other intersection. So we feel that this holistic approach is the way to resolve the problems without causing more trouble. So I really, really, really want to thank our county executive and the Board of Legislators. I think I was the happiest person in the room this morning, and they're always there for us. They've always been partners to us, and this is just another example. So I can't thank you enough, and it was great to come. It was a great hour that I spent, a good return on my time. Also today, I had the pleasure of going to Hastings, where the town was awarded a bronze certification as a climate smart community. Now, we originally got our certification in 2016. We were the 9th community in the entire state to receive that certification. And this is our recertification, and I think we were the only ones today that were recertified. So I'm really proud, and we have an incredible environmental committee in our town, and they are relentless and hardworking, and they're all volunteers, and they're always, come on, Jane, let's do this. Come on, Jane, we need this. And they're amazing. And, this is the proof in the pudding. So, I drove over in my EV car today that was from a grant that we earned because of our environmental certification. So there's real, real provable benefits. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about, I think when I talk about our government, I think one word is balance, and that's a real word to describe how we have to approach problems. So in keeping with the environment, our town sustainability committee has asked us to enact a tree law. And this was a really difficult process for us because on the one hand, we recognize the value of trees. You know, they're beautiful, they create shade, they absorb water, they produce oxygen, you know, they have wind screens. I mean, their benefits are countless. On the other hand, when you get someone who saves up all their money to buy their first house and they have a tree in their backyard and they want to cut it down so they can put a swing set up for their kids, I don't want to be the one to tell them that they can't use their property the way they want. So we hopefully we think we struck a really good balance on this. So our tree law restricts the number of trees that you can take down in a year on your property. We have a threshold of a tree that's 6 inches in diameter, and depending upon the size of your property, you're limited in the number of healthy trees. Obviously, if they're dead or they're dangerous, that doesn't count. But just healthy trees, you have a limit, and the limit goes by how large the property is. And that's within a year. You have to get a permit, you have a year to do it, and then there's a year hiatus before you can go for another permit. And what's also unique about our law is we require people to replace the trees. So again, depending upon the size of the tree that's taken down, you may have to put 1 tree up, or you may have to put 3 up if it's a huge tree. So this is a way of, we feel, balancing the rights of property owners to enjoy their property with balancing the need to preserve and enhance our tree canopy. So we're having a public hearing Wednesday night, and I'm sure it'll be crowded. And we have people who have told me that this is an abuse of power on the one side, and the other side are telling me we're not preserving the trees enough. So I guess if everybody's unhappy, we've struck a good balance. The other thing that we balance and that we're balancing now is that we're in the budget process. And we have, you know, a AAA bond rating, and we've done that because we've been very fiscally responsible. And so, again, we're balancing. Our residents have come to enjoy a very high level of service in our community, and they expect it, and we deliver it. We also have to keep a large reserve for rainy days, and one of the things that's always cited by Moody's when we get our AAA bond rating is that we have such healthy reserves. On the other hand, we can't raise taxes so much that it's not affordable for people to live in the community. So we go through this scalpel-like process of going line by line through the budget, see where we can cut, see where we can, you know, maybe partner with another community to save money, so that we can, you know, offer the services, keep a healthy reserve. You know, no one would have predicted COVID a couple of years ago, and thankfully we were able to still provide all the services that we needed to because we had such a healthy reserve. So we have to balance that with, you know, young people, old people, middle-class people who want a diverse community, and we can't tax people to death, so that all we're left with is investment bankers and lawyers. So that's our other big balancing act. So that's really what's going on in the town of Mamaroneck, and I thank you for letting me come in today, and as always, thank you for all of your support. I always know I can pick up the phone and call and get the assistance I need, and it's invaluable, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Supervisor of the Town of Mamaroneck, Jane Eney. And Jane, thank you for your leadership. And these are difficult times for all of us in local government, but we work through it and we try to get to the end result that's very positive. So we're very happy about that. I want to cover one other issue, and then I'm going to invite Deputy County Executive Ken Jenkins to cover a couple of points. And I want to talk about the proposal that's been made by Westchester Joint Waterworks to swap a piece of land that they own with a piece of land that the county owns at the county airport to create a water filtration plant. Give you a little bit of background on it for those of you who may not know the issue. It is before the Board of Legislators for review. I'll talk about the process in a second. Westchester Joint Waterworks is the water utility agency that serves the town of Mamaroneck, the village of Mamaroneck, and the town village of Harrison. And the residents of those communities get their water through the Westchester Joint Waterworks. And the Westchester Joint Waterworks taps water that comes from the Kensico Reservoir right behind the Kensico Dam. There's been much discussion about water quality, and the federal government, the EPA, had determined by mandate that there needs to be created a filtration plant so that the water that comes from the reservoir must be filtered before it is then used by those people role in the town of Mamaroneck, village of Mamaroneck, and the town village of Harrison. It's also true that some of the water that comes through that system, Westchester Joint Waterworks, is then obtained by other water agencies around us, and they help fill the capacity for that portion of the Veolia water service area for Rybrook, Rye, and Portchester, and some other users around the county. In creating a water filtration plant, it is a significant capital project. It would be a major facility that would have some disruption to the immediate area that it's based in, but it is a necessity, and there is no option to not build a water filtration plant. That has already been mandated by the federal government. The question at hand is, where should that plant be built? The original piece of land that Westchester Joint Waterworks had, located, generally speaking, in the Purchase neighborhood, near where the county airport is, but east of Purchase Street, Route 120, which goes through the hamlet of Purchase, which is within the town of Harrison, was the original site. There was community opposition to that site originally, and Westchester Joint Waterworks identified a piece of land that's owned by the county and has formally requested the county swap our land for their land. There's no financial benefit to the county in it. We merely give one piece of land to the Westchester Joint Waterworks. They give us a comparable piece of land, and on that site, the second site, which is closer to the corner of Lake Street and Purchase Street, that they would then build the treatment plant on that site. That proposal to do that requires action by the Westchester County Board of Legislators to approve the swap of land between the first site and now the second site, which is the site that's under discussion. And the second site has also reached controversial levels. There are individuals who live in and around that neighborhood that do not support the second site being used for the water treatment plant. There's an immediate neighbor for a Quaker Meeting House congregation that's right next to the site that opposes this site being used, and there are some other individuals with different environmental assessments that believe this is the wrong site for it to be used. Formally, in the last 60 days or so, Westchester Joint Waterworks officially approached the county government with documents that made the request for the swap of land, and they laid out the environmental review process that they went under and some of the public debate that has gone on already between neighbors and the agency. Some of this has been before the Harrison Planning Board. They don't have to opine on it, but they studied the issue and received testimony. And now it comes before the Westchester County Board of Legislators for their review, and that is where we are now. There was an initial meeting last week in which the Joint Waterworks presented their case to one of the board's committees, and now there's a game plan. It's tentative. It hasn't been locked into stone. Projects out over the next 90, 120 days, where a variety of things have to happen in order for this request for the swap to happen. And the swap request can be passed or it can be defeated. I believe it's a simple majority vote, so 9 votes either way, 9 votes in favor or 9 votes against, will serve as the situation relative to this. The people who oppose the second site have reasons and rationale. The people that support it being at that site have reasons and rationale. There is overhanging the threat that the federal government might decide to fine Westchester Joint Waterworks if they feel that the agency is not trying to comply with the federal mandate to create the water filtration plant. It is completely within the federal government's jurisdiction to do that if they choose to do it. There is that fear, and that fining represents a financial impact to the water users and the ratepayers within those communities that I've identified already. So it's a volatile issue in that portion of the county that affects, and there are people who live outside that area who are concerned about it. Anything that happens in and around the airport immediately starts to generate other types of actions and interests, even if it's not a direct impact on those individuals where they live, under the flight plan, or wherever they might live. They find common interest and common ground in it. I share this information to you because it is a public policy issue. You'll see there's already been stories written about it. Local weekly newspapers that cover this area, Westmore News in Portchester and the Examiner News, have covered elements of this story. But the process of decision is with the Board of Legislators in committee. At some point in time, after they've heard and studied this issue appropriately, they'll make the decision to either vote out an agreement to swap the land, or they'll choose not to do that. They might do that by tabling the issue, or they might have it out and vote it down. There's a couple of different ways that they may choose to do it. As an executive branch, we are alongside the Board of Legislators, analyzing the discussions that we hear. Our role comes into place if the board acts on it favorably and something comes before us, then it's up to me to sign it. I sign it, I don't sign it, there's a veto, an override, there's a host of different procedural things. What's most important, though, that I want to emphasize in highlighting this issue is that I've heard out there debate and surreptitious rumors about there being a secret plan or a deal that's already been cooked up. We're in a very divisive time right now in our society, and I'd be a fool not to admit that what happens at the national level filters all the way down to the local level. And the sense that there's some QAnon conspiracy or some far-left conspiracy behind every public policy issue saturates the way we look at every single policy issue. So let me state declaratively and in a final fashion, as the chief executive of the county and the head of the administrative branch of the county, there is no arrangement to either approve or disapprove of this land swap. This is an open issue to be reviewed, debated by the Board of Legislators, and they come to their own independent judgment. I have written a letter to the Westchester Joint Waterworks, which they responded to, and I indicated the information that we needed to have and how I thought they needed to make their case, and I have interacted with the critics of the Joint Waterworks request and given them the same encouragement. Come to the meetings, express your point of view, back up your point of view with facts and figures so that people can make an informed judgment. We cannot constantly run government on symbolism. We have to run it on substance. We have to know what it is we advocate for and why, and be persuasive with the other side, not just assertive that we're right and the other side is corrupt. That has crippled us in a lot of ways in matters of public policy. It's certainly all over Washington and to some extent at the other levels of government, but we can't afford to let that be the way we make decisions in Westchester County. Over the years, we have had partisan debate, and we've had active debate between people who might be in the same political party who just disagree on public policy. But you get a better end result of public policy if you have open, free debate and dialogue, but you let merit and logic decide at the end of the day what you do. Now, we might see merit and logic differently. We might come to a different observation. But if we both focused on those things being the reason by which we make our decision, as opposed to spuriously thinking about this is really a secret deal that's going to advantage somebody and that's why they're doing it, it is corrosive to the process. So let me repeat what I've said. Let me be clear. There is no predetermined decision on what to do relative to the swap of land. The decision will be made by the Board of Legislators on review of the substance of the issue, with both sides being properly represented, all points of view being aired, and then a decision coming up that will weigh it out. Certainly somebody's going to be unhappy with the end result that comes out of this process, but that is what government is, and that's how government has to act if it acts in a proper and appropriate fashion. If anybody doubts my sincerity, all I would say, people doubted my sincerity when we said we would rebuild Memorial Field. Oh, it's been 10 years, nobody's done anything here. It's not going to happen. It happened. You doubt my sincerity of asserting that we will build a new and proper family court in New Rochelle. The can have been kicked down the road for 6.5 years. Oh, that's never going to happen. They're not committed to that. It's been built. The collapsing of the Miller House, which was on the verge with a blue top over it for 10 years. Oh, it's a debate. They don't really care. Well, we cared. It was renovated, and it's now open and being used by the public. And I can give you many more examples of that over the course of this administration. People who are worried about the airport, well, they're going to sell off the airport. They're going to privatize it. We stopped privatization dead in its tracks. There's been no expansion of the airport during these 6 years. We're having to deal with problems that are because the airport hasn't been modernized. The flow of traffic inside the terminal is a mess, and there's no way to defend it any other way than to say that there's a modernization effort that has to be undertaken. But it has not been baked into the cake at this stage of the game. It's a debatable topic going forward, as are many other topics. It's important for me to argue for the integrity of the government process, because if you don't believe that government is decided fairly and balanced, then it's very easy for you to take a decision you don't like and accuse the people that made that decision of doing it because of corrupt reasons and corrupt interests. And then we have no democracy, my friends. We don't decide anything. You get your way, or you accuse the other side of being illegal and corrupt and all these awful different things. In this one case, now if you're watching what I'm saying in Peekskill, probably doesn't feel like it affects you at all. If you're down in Pelham, probably doesn't affect you much at all. In the Ludlow section of Yonkers, probably doesn't affect you much at all, except that there are issues that matter in Peekskill. There are issues that matter in Pelham They're issues that matter in Ludlow Park. And if you don't have confidence or faith in the process in this issue, then you would naturally not have confidence or faith in the issues that deal with Pelham, with Peekskill, with Ludlow Park. We intend for you to have confidence that what we're trying to do is what's fair and what's right. So the Westchester Joint Waterworks issue before the Board of Legislators, a timeline that stretches out over a couple of months, thorough analysis. You can see these meetings, they're streamed. You can see them from the comfort of your home, sitting, watching it on your devices, your laptop devices, and see what the debate and the discussion looks like, and it will come to some closure at the appropriate time. And this issue will be resolved, and then hopefully we'll give you one more example, in addition to Memorial Field and the New Rochelle Family Court in the Miller House, that we're sincere about what we're saying, so we intend to address problems. And we're doing this in a way that hopefully gives you a sense of confidence that the next round of issues will also be dealt with fairly and impartially. Next, I'd like to invite Ken Jenkins to come up and talk about this program that we've started on a regular basis to recognize our county employees who we consider heroes. And this is our weekly hero. Ken, it's all yours, my friend.
Thanks, George. Well, we're going today to talk about one of our weekly heroes during Domestic Violence Awareness Month, as well as Breast Cancer Awareness Month. That's why I have the pink on, because again, real men wear pink, and certainly we're supporting that particular effort. But today, we're going to have our program specialist, Martha Anderson, come up and join us, and with Robbie Schloff on the other side to be able to talk to us for a few minutes about the great things that she does. So come on up, Martha, and what we're going to do is talk a little bit about what Martha does and what she's been doing here in the county for such a long time. You know, listing Martha's duties does not do her justice at all. She is the forward-facing staff member on immigrant issues. She's a fierce advocate for the clients she is helping in the most meaningful ways, making sure their basic needs are met, as well as advocating for them within the justice and other systems. Martha has incredible relationships she's developed over the last 2 decades with our partners in DSS and other county agencies, as well as law enforcement throughout the county. Martha expects the best from all of us and continues to raise the excellence level for all the staff. Martha was hired in 2001 as the first Hispanic domestic violence advocate for the Office of Women. And recall that the Office of Women in 2001 was not a level office. It was just something that was under the county executive office, County Executive Spano at that time, and under our leadership on the Board of Legislators, we elevated it up to its own department because it does deserve that level of recognition. So Martha translates every Office for Women brochure materials for public dissemination. She provides comprehensive domestic violence services for Spanish-speaking and immigrant victims. She oversees advocates in the family court satellite offices, the aforementioned New Rochelle Family Court, the county executive mentioned, the things that we continue to do, conducts outreach and education in the Hispanic community, networks with and supports service providers that assist the Hispanic community, and specifically in the domestic violence awareness role in making sure that everyone is protected. She provides training for government offices and nonprofits. She participates in the domestic violence high-risk team trainings with a focus on our immigrant victims, assists those nonprofits and service immigration clients on contract compliance, identifies system challenges and collaborates to implement changes. And more importantly, she's just been a mentor for the Judge Judy program for the past 15 years. So what I'm going to do is ask Martha to come and say a few words. And again, congratulations for our heroine of the week.
Shiro.
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 Thank you. Thank you so much for this honor. I truly appreciate it. Thank you to our fearless leader, Robbie Schloff from our office, and also Your Honor, I really appreciate this recognition. And I also accept it on behalf of all the women that I've serviced in the community. And also to mention, it is Hispanic Heritage Month, and I also accept it for the community that I serve.
Thanks, Martha. Right, and it's certainly, we have a convergence. It's Hispanic Heritage Month until October 15th as well. Domestic Violence Awareness Month, Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I'm sure that there's some other ones that we'll bring up. But at this point in time, I want to turn back over to the county executive so that we can certainly have an opportunity to hear some more from Robbie Schloff talking about Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Back to you, boss.
Ladies, stay in place. Both Martha and Robbie, we'd like you to stay here. This is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and it may seem that it is a recent time ago, I guess it's recent for me, but in 1980, a group of women that were concerned about the lack of attention to violence against women in all forms encouraged Westchester County to create the Office for Women. It's 43 years since that date, and the county executives that have preceded me, starting with Aldo Bello and Andy O'Rourke and Andy Spano, in that initial period of time, maintained and grew this office. And it's critical because Domestic Violence Awareness Month taps into a legitimate public policy concern and problem that affects women and affects our society at large. So with Robbie Schloff here, I'd like for her and Martha to talk about this priority and what this represents and means.
Thank you, and thank you to the two of you who were on the County Board of Legislators to make the County Office for Women a codified charter agency so that no one could say this is not an important endeavor. And we so appreciate you recognizing the importance of this issue. The most common response for police is a response to domestic violence. And with your support, we have really elevated the partnerships between our office, the police community in Westchester County, the judiciary. Thank you for the New Rochelle Family Court. It's fantastic. And all of us working together to try to prevent and respond to domestic violence. I just want to say that we are blessed to have Martha in our office. And with 30% or so of Westchester County being Spanish-speaking, having 4 Spanish-speaking domestic violence advocates in our office is really something that is essential, and we appreciate that. And Martha, do you have any more to say on this? No? Okay, so we thank you so much for recognizing us. Thank you, Martha. And we also want to say that if you or someone you know, a friend, a loved one, is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out to us. We have lots of resources in the county. We're very proud of that.
Yes, and our services are free and confidential.
Oh, and thank you. And Spanish speaking.
Ladies, we'll have you go this way. Thank you very much for your leadership. I want to thank Robbie Schloff, who's director of this office, has done an exemplary job through a number of administrations, and how much we appreciate all of these efforts. And Martha, thank you for being a hero. We have many of them in county government. We're glad that you're one of them, and the work that you've done really matters a lot to all of us. Let me put on your calendar a date if you're so interested. We are having our 2024 Westchester County Budget Input Session, public session, scheduled for Monday, October 16th. That's 2 weeks from today. It's going to be held at the Greenberg Public Library in the multi-purpose room. And the Greenberg Public Library is right on Tarrytown Road. You'll see it as a side access road along 119, which connects Elmsford, Tarrytown to the west with White Plains to the east. And the Greenberg Library is the setting from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Those of us in the executive branch of government will listen to the input that individuals may have. It could be an individual, it could be representative of an organization, to come in and talk about what they think should be priorities in our Westchester County budget. We're obliged to complete our budgetary work and present it to the Board of Legislators on November 10th. That's an established date in our charter for review by the Board of Legislators, sufficient review for them to complete their work, and then have a session to complete it on time. There'll be some negotiations, no doubt. There's the potential for executive vetoes, but we haven't been unable to negotiate out additions and deletions together cooperatively during our prior 5 budgets, so we expect to have a similar situation. We work bipartisanly. But when we created this forum in 2018, now these 5 years ago. This is the first time that the executive branch said, let us hear from the public before we finalize the budget and present the budget to the legislature. The legislature has responsibility, Ken and I both chair the legislature, to have public hearings on the budget when it's presented. But if you want input before it happens, this is that opportunity. So it's coming up on Monday, October 16th, 2 weeks from today, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. at the Greenberg Public Library. You're welcome to come and attend. It'll be first come, first speak. And there won't be a presentation of a budget because the budget isn't finalized at that point. So we go almost immediately straight to public comment. And if you're interested in knowing, well, how does the budget work, you can go online, westchestercountyny.gov or westchestergov.com. Look at the website, and you have a way to look at the current 2023 budget, the budget that we're operating under now. It's a complicated budget. It involves $2.3 billion worth of spending, the current budget, spread out over a number of different departments. It's not easy to absorb. It took me a little while when I first became a county legislator to understand the budget. But the bottom line is it's there in public for you to review. You can take a look at it, and then out of that make commentary for what you think should be in the 2024 budget, and we invite you to attend. Next, we'll talk about what happens at parks. Ken has developed his expertise in knowing the parks events, so I'll give that back to him.
Thanks, George. One more quick shout out for the county executive, Latimer, as he said in 2019, making another opportunity for public input to continue to show what he was talking about as far as demonstrating the transparency of this particular administration and the Latimer administration to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to be heard before the process starts. So again, that's on October 16th, 4 to 6. Shout out again, County Executive Latimer and all the team that we go out and we listen to the folks, because it's important to hear those voices, and whether it was making sure that you created and have a good neighbor policy, which is above and beyond. This is another example of that. And again, it goes right to those examples for whatever rumors might be out there, to show what the facts are and show what the record is. And quite honestly, there's no reason for anyone to question anything that ever comes out of this administration because of the county executive's leadership in making sure there's transparency. But for our parks, it is October. That means we're heading towards Halloween, and we have certainly a continuation of several events that we're going to keep going on at Alfred B. Del Bello, County Executive Del Bello Muscoot Farm in Somers. We're going to have on October 3rd, that's tomorrow, from 9:30 to 10:30 a.m., the Little Explorers program. So it's for those children that are 3 to 5 years old. You can have an opportunity to bring them to the farm for a fun morning of stories, crafts, animal and nature activities. Again, that's at Al B. Del Bello Muscoot Farm in Somers. That's tomorrow, October 3rd, from 9:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Friday, back at the Muscoot Farm at Alfred B. Del Bello, so County Executive Del Bello Muscoot Farm. That's going to be the Pumpkin Patch movie screening. It's a great pumpkin, Charlie Brown, which means that it's going to be followed by, over the weekend, the annual pumpkin picking fundraiser. So that'll happen on Saturday, October 7th from 10 a.m. to 3:30, and Sunday, 9:30 to 2:30, 10:30 to about 10 a.m. to 3:30 on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So October 7th, 8th, and 9th. You can get those details. It's on the bottom of the screen, of course, because the great communications team we have, muscootfarm.org. So muscootfarm.org. You can get the information on the pumpkin picking fundraiser, which will include pumpkins, hay rides, and more, to be able to be purchased. That benefits the Friends of Muscoot Farm. Again, something else happening in our 18,000 acre nationally accredited park system. That's your park system. Make sure that you enjoy it. You should also be sure to sign up for the Parks E-Club weekly newsletter. It has all of the great activities that are happening around in every county park. So again, be sure to sign up on that. That's on our county website, parks.westchestergov.com, and you'll see a nice pop-up for that to sign up for the E-Club sign up, and it is chock full of great information at every park going around in Westchester County. Certainly, we wrapped up this year with Bicycle Sunday, Tour de Yonkers, and it was a great day, a beautiful day, as County Executive Latimer mentioned. And again, it's your park system. Make sure to take advantage and utilize it. Back to you, George.
Thank you, Ken. Just a couple of things more that we want to highlight as we go forward. We continue to monitor the migrant asylum seeker placements here in Westchester County. There's been no change from the last number of reports. In fact, it's been 3 months now since we had any new placements to talk of. We still have the same 3 locations that we have had since the beginning of this, in Yonkers, in Ardsley, and in White Plains at the 3 defined locations. We're still averaging slightly more than 400 total individuals with us, somewhat over 100 children in general, 1 school-age child, but 100 or so, 125 or so children, and the balance 280 or so adults out of the total of 400. I remind you that there's been no incidents of crime attached to these placements. There have been no spread of disease attached to these placements, and that is the same experience we had 5 years ago in 2018 when the Trump administration placed 1,000 migrant children in Westchester County at 4 locations: Yonkers, Yonkers, Dobbs Ferry, Irvington, and in Somers. And we were able to get through that situation effectively. We hope for the same good result here. We have still not gotten the federal government to give us either a satellite court to adjudicate cases in White Plains or work permits, and we wait in both of those 2 issues, and hopefully we'll have some good result. I think we've covered most of what we wanted to cover. We took an hour of your time. We hope it was time well spent if you watched it all the way through. You may be seeing this on tape, but gives you a little update of some of these things that are happening. We'll have constant updates to report on flooding so that you know where we are in our progress with this. We hope that Mother Nature will do us a solid and not give us another rain incident as we had last Friday, which came, by the way, on the heels of a prior weekend that was extremely rainy and saturated the ground. That was a factor also with some of the runoff problems that we've had. Let me just close my comments by saying that, we've watched in Washington drama this week with the potential shutdown of government. I thought that it was going to be shut down the way it looked. They stepped back from the brink and had a 45-day grace period, which is good. We do not need a shutdown, just like we did not need a violation of the debt ceiling when that happened earlier this year. I worry about county issues primarily, and the county is much more connected to the state and to the municipal governments than to the federal government. I highlighted where we are at the budget process last week and alluded to it again this week as we have our public hearing session and going into it. A county budget is less complicated than a state budget. State's less complicated than the federal budget. But there are parallel structures of things that have to be done. There's infrastructure at all levels of government. There's budgeting at all levels of government. This is a common part of what we do. And it's distressing to know that the decision makers at the highest level of our government are prepared to play Russian roulette with a variety of these public policy issues, because this is more about the rhetoric and about the argument between political philosophies, the inability to go back to a base and tell the base that there has to be compromise. There can't be compromise. We must win. We don't care what the other base does, and we don't care if we take somebody out or depose them, all these kinds of things. Those of us in public office, and I've been in public office for a while. I've never served at the federal level, but I have served at the municipal level, at the county level, and at the state level, in both legislative and now executive functions. There is a responsibility that we have to people to provide basic services. If you're in the village, town, or the city, one of the responsibilities that you have is to provide fire service to those individuals, garbage pickup, police services, recreation, snow removal when the snow falls. At the county level of government, regional local services, transportation in our bus system, at the airport. We have a responsibility to incarcerate criminals. We have the responsibility to administer social service programs and protect public health, and to handle sewage and the treatment of it, and to take the garbage that gets collected locally and then finally dispose of that along with the recyclables. At the state level of government, there are certain key responsibilities. They fall very much into K-12 and higher education. They govern the various professional practices and set the rules by which they operate. The state government deals very heavily with healthcare matters and is the responsible agency to supervise what happens in hospitals and nursing homes, things that matter much to all of us. So the federal government has its responsibility, and certainly, the national protection of our interests in worldwide matters, international affairs, is critical. Each one has to play its role, and it's very important, I think, for those of us to look at each of these different levels of government, the decision makers in government, through the eye of what gets results. What are the results that we're responsible for at our level of government, and how do we deliver on that? Because it is very easy to give a speech. I'm giving a speech right now. It's not very easy to make sure that the things you promise to do get done. And now, after 6 years, almost 6 years, we're proud of the things we have done, but we're also humbled by the fact that there are many more things to be done. The flooding issue that we alluded to has to be dealt with in a more profound way. We have to try to reduce the amount of these impacts. We've talked before about affordable housing. We've accomplished a lot. We've got a lot more to do on affordable housing, and on issue after issue, climate change and so forth, we have our responsibilities to do. The important piece is to remember to focus on what actually gets done, what actually are the results of this effort. And I'm afraid, and I am by profession a sales and marketing executive, that's what I did for a career living before I've done this, is that we tend to focus on the symbolism. We tend to focus on the rhetoric. We tend to focus on things that attract headlines. And we know that the media will be attracted to headlines. They'll be attracted to man bites dog, not necessarily the way things happen on a day-to-day basis. And they figure that by highlighting certain things, they'll get public attention and eyeballs. And in the process of doing that, they will overemphasize those things. You'll see all of the different things that happen in the world that are not good or helpful or proper because they're news, and you won't know that every single day the system works that turns the electricity on in your department and makes sure that you open a faucet and the water comes out, and when you flush the toilet in the bathroom, waste products disappear. That is part of what government and government-related utilities are responsible for. I would encourage you in the days that we have to try very hard to keep a clear-eyed focus on what represents results, because it's the results at the end of the day that affect your lives. And whether or not a flooding incident affects your life, the everyday functioning of government affects your life. We have to do it well. We have to do it better. But we have to do it in a climate where there's a sense of dialogue with residents and those of us who are in positions of public authority, because we're not in positions of public authority forever. There's a time and a place when we leave public office. And when we leave public office, we're accountable to the people that we see in everyday living. What did you do with power when you had it? Did you use it for self-aggrandizement? Did you do it to have some kind of popularity in the moment? Or did you do it in order to create some things of lasting benefit that will continue beyond your day in the arena? And when we look around, that's things that we have. We have a county center that we were able to reopen this year. The problematic parkways that we have that still give us transportation linkage that's essential. The public parks that have been acquired and built over the years. These are things of value that people before us created, and we have inherited, and we have a responsibility to make sure that they're intact for the people that come after us, and people in public office after us, but also people in generations that live on after us. And if we don't address those issues, then no matter what happens on Election Day, we're not doing our job. We want to do our job. We want to do it well. And for that to happen, we need an engaged citizenry. Not just a citizenry that sees the scandal of the moment and reacts to that, but a citizenry that understands what's supposed to happen and whether or not it is happening, so you can properly redirect as individuals what happens in the society of ours. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. Thank you for watching. Have a good, safe week, and we'll be back to communicate a little more next week.